Hello, hello. So today I want to tell you about our stress cycle, the hormones involved, and how stress really touches every single area of our body. We're often told when we walk into maybe a doctor's office and we're complaining about weight gain or fatigue, or we're worried about our thyroid. Stress is always paid a little bit of lip service. Oh, make sure you're not too stressed out. Or, oh, is this a stressful time for you? Or, oh, make sure you're managing your stress. What does that even mean? We're going to dig into all of that and unpack ways to manage stress and how to think about that. But for today, we want to focus on the physiology and the impact of stress and our stress hormones on the body. So, first things first, I want to tell you a little bit about cortisol. And cortisol is our number one stress hormone. This is a stress hormone that is made in our adrenal glands that impacts every body system. Oftentimes, it feels like cortisol gets a really bad rap, but you absolutely need cortisol. If you didn't have cortisol, you would never get out of bed. The key with cortisol is we want to have just the right amount. So we want to make sure that we get the right amount throughout the day. Ideally, what happens with cortisol is you wake up, and 30 minutes after you wake up, you have the highest amount of cortisol in your bloodstream that you will for the course of the entire day. And we call that the cortisol awakening response. After that, cortisol slowly declines throughout the rest of the day. If we have dysregulated cortisol, oftentimes we see different situations. We can see a pattern where cortisol is just elevated throughout the entire course of the day. You wake up, it's extremely high, and then it slowly dissipates, but it never really gets into the proper range. Or we can see dysregulated cortisol where your stress hormones are bouncing up, down, and all around throughout the course of a day. And then what generally happens when you have been really stressed and your adrenals have been pumping out cortisol for a really long time is we'll see a pattern where stress is flatlined or very, very low throughout the day. And it's actually hard to do the things that would normally feel very, very easy. Before we get into a little bit more about cortisol and what it should look like, I want to talk to you about something that we're going to call the stress cycle. It's also known as the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. The most important thing I want you to know about the HPA axis I'm about to describe is that it fans out and really touches everything. We could call this the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal thyroid gonadal metabolism brain. Like we can expand heart, we can expand this to all body systems. Eventually it touches absolutely everything, and that's why it's so crucial that you understand the role that stress plays in your body and how it works. So first of all, we have triggers. We all have triggers. We should have stress. We're humans. This is how it goes. So it could be stress in the form of emotional stress, mental stress. Food can sometimes be a trigger, especially if we're sensitive to certain foods. Gut imbalances, which we'll talk about later, can also be something that can contribute to your overall stress load. Too many toxins in the bloodstream can contribute to this, and stealth infections, which we're really not going to touch in this program, but that can be something that may contribute. When we have these triggers, our stress response is activated. And what happens in the brain, it happens in the brain first. The hypothalamus releases something called corticotropin releasing factor. This signals for your pituitary gland to release ACTH, which is another hormone that travels down to the adrenal glands and entices your adrenal glands to release adrenaline. So you probably know adrenaline, fight or flight, in cortisol. And what happens? You have a fight or flight response. You're very much in your sympathetic nervous system at this point. Ideally, your short-term stress is going to end. But what we know in our modern life is that stress lasts for much longer than 20 minutes. And this is ideally how long a stress cycle will take to complete itself. We may have stress for 8 hours at work or longer. that just never seems to go away. So when we have this chronic sort of stress, especially when it comes to emotional or mental stress, or even in some cases physical stress, we see that our stress response is just activated all the time. This starts to affect other body systems, and it starts to affect how our body is working. We may have sleep problems. We may find ourselves suffering from anxiety, depression, mood swings. Brain fog is very present. It's hard to remember what word you were searching for. You go into a room and you can't remember why you went there. Digestive problems. When you are in your sympathetic nervous system, the body actually shunts energy away from the digestive tract. So your body, your digestive tract doesn't have the resources to work as effectively as it should. You may find yourself craving sugar, fat, or salt cravings. I want to pause here for a moment. When the adrenals are working, they actually demand quite a bit of potassium and sodium. So this explains some of the salt cravings that you may experience. Sugar, remember, is your body's #1 source of energy. Very normal to crave sugar if you're in that fight or flight response, because your body, physiologically speaking, doesn't know the difference between you being chased by a tiger and you having to answer 10 emails. It truly doesn't. So it's going to ask for that sugar demand, even though you really don't need it if you're in a situation where you're answering stressful emails. We may see weight gain in the middle as a result. This can happen because maybe of what you're eating, but more likely, this is something that cortisol will do. It's a protective mechanism. You know what? We're not going to let the body starve. We're going to make sure this body cannot starve. So elevated cortisol means it's much easier for you to keep on weight. Part of the way your body does this is by causing a little bit more of something called insulin resistance. Insulin resistance happens when the cells in your body do not accept and use blood sugar, so sugar that is traveling through the bloodstream. So if your cells aren't willing to accept sugar, it's got to go somewhere, and it goes into storage. So it may be stored in the muscle, it may be stored in the liver, but the other place it's stored is fat tissue. As a result of too much cortisol production, we may see hormone issues. Cortisol is steroid hormone, and oftentimes if we're making a lot of it, something will happen called the cortisol steal, where it will steal a lot of raw materials, so building blocks of hormones, and there won't be enough to go around for some of our other hormones. Metabolic syndrome, circling back, I mentioned sometimes that stress can create a situation where we're just more insulin resistant. Talking about what you can look for in the future, we're going to be talking about this more and more as we get into our gut health and as we get into the fat loss phase of the program. But we will be really thinking hard and tailoring a diet to support insulin sensitivity to help your cells get back into the rhythm of accepting blood sugar to use it for energy. And I'll talk more about that in a later session. Sometimes we'll see high blood pressure. And then one of the more common things is immune system issues. Development of an autoimmune condition is often secondary to an overactive stress response or chronic stress response like this. And also, if you've ever been on vacation and you found that as soon as you hit that beach, you got a cold, your body finally could relax. A lot of times we'll see that happen as well. When your body finally gets a chance to relax, your immune system goes down and you do get sick. On the other side, on the flip side, you may also find that you are always sick and you can't quite seem to shake it. That's because a lot of your energy and attention is not going towards creating a robust immune system. So the work we're going to be doing in the next few weeks is going to be really geared toward supporting your stress response. If you find that you're chronically stressed, we're going to talk about different strategies that you can start employing, habits you can start developing to lower your stress, lower the time that you spend in your sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system is our fight or flight mode. Other things associated with this are freeze and fawn as well. And then our parasympathetic nervous system state is our rest and digest state. Really important that we get into these states or get into parasympathetic nervous system state when we're eating and then also when we're resting. And rest, my friends, is so important. So we will continue the conversation around making time for rest.